Good morning, and thank you for inviting me. I'm Dr. Ashman Khairuddin from University Technology of Sarawak, and today I'll be presenting our study titled What Ethical Principles Reinforce Public Commitments to Free Education? A case study of Sarawak's free tertiary education scheme and intergenerational fairness. Our aim is to explore not just whether free tertiary education is desirable, but how it can be justified ethically and sustained practically. We'll consider philosophical frameworks, stakeholder perspectives, and policy lessons drawing on interviews with students, parents, educators, and policymakers. My hope is that this session stimulates discussion on how Sarawak's initiative can become a model of equity and fairness across generations, and how the challenges we face can be a lesson for other states wishing to implement free education. Malaysia already provides free primary and secondary schooling, yet higher education is largely financed through loans. As recent research notes, student debt is now the second most common debt among Malaysian youth. The students graduating from public universities typically get loans of around 26,000 ringgit, while those in private institutions owe about 56,000 ringgit for a 4-year degree. In 2026, Sarawak will break with this model by introducing the free tertiary education scheme, universal free tuition at 4 state-linked universities, and cost of living stipends for low-income families. The policy covers rich and poor alike, prioritize STEM and professional fields to build local human capital. It reflects a global shift towards viewing higher education not as a private commodity, but as a public good and a right. The announcement of the FTES drew widespread attention. In December 2025, the Premier of Sarawak declared that the scheme would continue beyond its inaugural year, emphasizing that it's not only for 2026, but sustainable towards the future. The state has allocated 250 million to launch the program and pledged to seek revenue streams, including income from oil and gas, to keep providing it. This political commitment signals that leaders recognize the importance of transforming resource wealth into human capital. It also raises the question, how do we embed ethical principles so that such promises survive electoral cycles and fiscal pressures? The starting point of our investigation is a cost-sharing model in which tuition fees and subsidized loans have created a generation burdened by long-term debt. As we saw, the average student loan is substantial. Such debt raises question of who benefits. Does a universal tuition-free scheme improve access for disadvantaged groups, or simply subsidize those who would have attended anyway? Is the scheme fair across generations? Current taxpayers may foot the bill today while future budget absorb the cost. And can the program be sustained without compromising quality? Scholarship notes that free tuition can raise enrollment but does not automatically improve completion rates or equity of outcomes. Therefore, our study asks, how can free tertiary education be ethically justified and practically sustained in Sarawak? Not all commentators are convinced that free tuition schemes fulfill their promises. In May 2025, editorial Dr. Said Alwi argued that Sarawak's scheme sounds better than it works, warning that unconditional fee waivers may undermine the very goals of widening access and building human capital. Such critiques highlight potential pitfalls. Political populism can lead to over-promising. Resources may be diverted from primary and secondary education, and universities could suffer from a sudden surge in enrollment. These concerns underline the importance of grounding policy in ethical principles and evidence, rather than just in slogans. First, how does the FTES align with principles of equity and the public good? Second, who stands to benefit and is the scheme fair across generations? Third, what challenges must be addressed to ensure that the initiative's sustainability and equitable impact? To answer this, we conducted a qualitative study employing semi-structured interviews with students, parents, academics, university leaders, and policymakers. We deliberately sampled 15 Sarawakians from diverse socio-economic backgrounds to capture a range of experiences. Our ethical analysis draws on three influential works. The first one, John Rawls' difference principle, allows inequalities only when they improve the situation of the least advantaged. In other words, redistributive policies like FTES are justified if they make disadvantaged students better off than they would be under free loan regime. Amartya Sen's capability approach shifts the focus from resources to what people are able to do and be. Sen emphasizes that development should expand real freedoms and the resources and utilities are means rather than ends. A free tuition scheme on this view must enhance students' capabilities, such as the ability to study without financial anxiety rather than just waive fees. Finally, international human rights law recognizes higher education as a right. Article 13 of the International Covenant of Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights states that higher education must be made equally accessible and calls for the progressive introduction of free education. The dominant economic rationale for tertiary education is the human capital theory, which treats education as a private investment that yields high earnings. Consequently, tuition fees are seen as fair because graduates capture most of the returns. In contrast, the public good perspective holds that university education yields broader social benefits, a skilled workforce, civic participation, and innovation. FTES embraces the latter view by making tuition free for all. Critics worry that universal fee waivers may disproportionately benefit already privileged students who have cultural capital to gain admissions, while low-income students still struggle with living costs. Sarawak's scheme mitigates this by coupling universal tuition with need-based stipends for the bottom 40% of households, B40, therefore combining universality with progressivity. From our interviews, a clear theme emerged: hope and relief. One first-year engineering student described the FTES as a game changer. Now I can focus on learning instead of worrying about repaying loans. A mother from a rural district told us that my son can now dream bigger without worrying about paying for university, reflecting widespread parental relief. Many community members saw broader benefits, believing that more graduates will contribute to local development and foster pride. Nevertheless, concerns surfaced about capacity and quality. Students wondered whether universities would have enough lecturers, labs, accommodation to absorb increased enrollment. Parents too questioned whether free tuition might dilute academic standards. Policymakers framed the FTES as a social contract. One senior official explained that Sarawak's natural resources are not for hoarding, but for investing in our people, echoing John Rawls' view that inequalities should benefit the least advantaged. Legislators emphasized that a sovereign wealth fund built on oil and gas will finance the program and insulate it from annual budget fluctuations. This echoes the broader principle that present wealth should expand capabilities of future generations. University leaders generally welcome the scheme, seeing it as an opportunity to widen access and reduce brain drain. However, a dean cautioned, our role is not just to educate, but to create a workforce that stays in Sarawak. To realize this, universities must strengthen industry linkages, offer relevant programs, and create local employment pathways. Applying our normative frameworks, FTES scores highly on equality for opportunity. By eliminating tuition fees, it removes a major barrier to participation. The inclusion of a 15,000 ringgit annual stipend for B40 students further acknowledges that living expenses can be prohibitive. This design mirrors Rawls' difference principle by directing additional resources to the least advantaged. From a capability perspective, free tuition expands students' freedoms to pursue free higher education without the corrosive disadvantage of debt. The policy also aligns with human rights obligation to progressively introduce free higher education. However, equality is not achieved by access alone. Equity requires adequate funding per student, robust academic support, and measures to address linguistic and cultural barriers faced by indigenous and rural students. Only then free education translates into meaningful participation and completion. Intergenerational equity demands that public spending today does not compromise the options available to future citizens. The UN Development Program defines intergenerational fairness as the idea that the pursuit of welfare by the current generation should not diminish the opportunity for a good and decent life for succeeding generations. By converting finite resources wealth into human capital, FTES exemplifies stewardship rather than leaving oil and gas revenues idle or not used. The state invests them collective in education. At the same time, the scheme replaces individual student debt with a collective investment, distributing costs across societies in time. This rebalance enhances fairness across generations, provided that the fund is managed sustainably. Graduates in turn have reciprocal obligations to contribute through taxes, service, and local engagement. Policymakers acknowledge that without strategies to retain talent, the benefits of FTS may leak out via brain drain. Therefore, intergenerational fairness cannot be separated from retention and reciprocity. Sorry. Our analysis identifies several challenges. Financial sustainability is paramount. Second, quality versus quantity. The third one, meritocracy and admissions. Increased demand could exacerbate university inequalities as well. Urban students crowd out rural peers. Fourth, equity for near-miss cohorts. Graduates who narrowly miss the cut-off year may feel unfairly treated. Loan relief programs could mitigate this grievance. So these caveats underscore that ethical intent must be matched by careful design. To address these challenges, we propose 6 recommendations. First, secure sustainable funding by ring-fencing a portion of oil and gas revenues into educational trusts and diversifying income streams through public-private partnership and Islamic endowments. Transparent governance of the fund will help maintain public trust. Second, maintain quality. Third, adopt data-driven equity. Collect and analyze data on beneficiaries of income by income, ethnicity, gender, and location. Fourth, strengthening intergenerational links and retention. Fifth, establish ongoing evaluation and transparency. Commission independent assessments every 2 to 3 years, hold public forums to discuss findings and publish results. Sixth, integrate economic planning by aligning sponsored disciplines with labor market needs and fostering university-industry partnership. Curriculum design should respond to regional development strategies so that graduates find meaningful employment at home, reinforcing the scheme's intergenerational reciprocity. In conclusion, Sarawak's FTES embodies a bold commitment to equality, capability expansion, and intergenerational fairness. By eliminating tuition fees and targeting living allowances to low-income students, FTES honors Volzian's justice, strengthens human capabilities, and fulfills international human rights obligations. Yet, the scheme's success hinges on sustainability, quality, and inclusion. Therefore, careful stewardship of resources, robust academic support, and data-driven adjustments will determine whether FTS becomes a lasting instrument of social mobility or just a fleeting experiment. As one policymaker told us, We are investing in future generations, not buying applause for today. Let us ensure that this investment leaves a legacy of fair shares, not debts, for those who come after us. Thank you for your attention, and I look forward to your questions and also your reflections. Thank you.